2045, that's the year the state has set to achieve 100% clean energy. That means cutting our dependence on fossil fuels like oil, gas, and coal, which are non-renewable sources that experts say can pollute the environment. Instead, focus is on harnessing nature's power of the sun, wind, ocean, and geothermal energy. But it's not without its challenges. We'll see where the state is in accomplishing its goal. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Laura Yamada. Well, the state is on a mission to phase out fossil fuels and completely switch to renewable energy by the year 2045. Now, this ambitious clean energy goal needs commitments from the federal and state governments and maybe most importantly, the local community. Over the years, efforts to transition to renewable energy have been ramping up, but several projects in Hawaii have faced opposition for a variety of reasons. Our panel tonight will discuss where the state is in reaching its green energy goal and what can be done to reduce concerns by residents. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. All right, now to our guests. James Griffin is the chair of the State of Hawaii Public Utilities Commission. He was appointed to the PUC by Governor Ige in 2017. The primary duty of the agency is to protect public interest by overseeing and regulating public utilities to ensure reliable service and reasonable rates. Colton Ching is the Senior Vice President of Planning and Technology at Hawaiian Electric Company. He's responsible for planning HECO's 100% renewable energy grid, as well as the procurement of cost-effective, reliable, and resilient renewable generation. David Bissell is the President and CEO of the Kauai Island Utility Cooperative. KIUC operates as a not-for-profit organization owned by its members and governed by an elected board of directors. The cooperative serves 33,000 electric accounts. And Kylie Wager-Cruz is a senior attorney for Earth Justice, a nonprofit public interest environmental law organization. Prior to joining Earth Justice, she served as a law clerk for the Honorable Mark E. Rechtenwald, Chief Justice of the Hawaii Supreme Court. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us tonight. And let's go ahead and kind of set the stage here. And let me start with you, James. Explain this. What is the state's progress right now toward its 100% renewable energy goal?
Sure. Thanks. Good evening, Lara. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and to represent our commission. At the moment, we have the state has goals in law requiring our electric utilities to meet certain renewable energy targets by certain dates. And in 2020, that number was 30%. And the good news, we were ahead of that target, both David's company and Colton's company. And if we look, break it down on the island of Oahu here, we're at 31%. For Maui County, collectively, served by Maui Electric is at 51%. Hawaii Island was at 43%. And David's company, KIUC, was at 67%. So we're ahead of target. And I think the other important thing to look at, if you look at the projects, the large number of projects in the queue on all these islands, we're set to make a big step forward, where for the Hawaiian Electric companies, they'll look to roughly approximately double the amount of renewable energy, or at least get to about 50% with the current round of projects. And actually with KIUC, with the projects they have coming online, they're looking at approaching 90% in the near term. So that's kind of at a aggregate level what we're seeing with the projects that we have in the queue at the moment.
And being that you mentioned both Colton and David, I kind of want to get give you both of you a chance to chime in there and give us your perspective on where we're at right now and any other numbers you can share. Maybe we'll start with you, Colton.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me on the show. As Jay mentioned, we did exceed by quite a bit the minimum requirement of 30% last year. We're proud to be hitting at 35% in total across all of the 5 islands that we serve. But we have a lot more ahead of us. And as Jay said, with the projects that are underway in various form, of construction, or right now before the Public Utilities Commission for review, and programs that we are proceeding on, as well as our expectations of the amount of customers that are electing to install distributed energy systems. In the next 5 years, we think we're going to be well north of 50%. And as Jay said, almost double of where we are today. So that's a huge lift that we expect, a huge move forward in the amount of renewable energy. At the same time, a significant reduction in the fossil fuels that we use as well.
And David, where are you sitting right now with all of this? I mean, really, Kauai has been leading the way in a number of areas.
Thank you for having me tonight. Appreciate the opportunity for having Kauai represented here amongst these distinguished guests. And Kauai in KIUC is a cooperative. We've reached 67% renewable. We have 3 very large utility scale solar and battery projects that we've completed that have helped push us to that level. We have biomass, we have hydroelectric power all on the island. And we're working really hard on developing a pump storage hydro project that, as Commissioner Griffin said, would put us to almost 90% if that project reaches completion.
David, I want to follow up with you a little bit on that. Do you think that it might be a little bit easier because you're on Kauai, because it's a little bit smaller, to be able to make the kind of progress that you've been able to make? Or would you credit, what else might you credit for being able to do that at this point?
I really credit our cooperative structure and our elected board of directors, which has a direct tie-in to the interests of our membership, which is essentially all the people of Kauai that buy electricity from us. They had the foresight back in 2008 to set a strategic target of reaching 50% renewable. And we blew past that target early, and then they raised it up to 70%. So there's been a consistent and long-term push towards reaching high levels of renewable really ever since we've been formed as a cooperative in 2002.
And just to make sure I clarify for folks, is because for people who aren't on Kauai, they may not be as familiar with what a cooperative is or understand it as much. So that means that the residents or they own a portion of it. Is that correct?
That's correct. Every person and company who buys electricity from us is a member in the cooperative, and they share in the success of the cooperative. We any earnings that we have are credited back to the membership, and to the extent we're financially strong enough, we actually refund our membership money. And since we've been formed, we've refunded over $30 million directly to our customers.
Now, Colton, we were talking about sort of the successes that David has had on Kauai. What are you seeing as far as island by island, with each island having to generate its own power? Will be converting to green energy be more difficult? Are you foreseeing it'll be more difficult for certain islands? What can you share with folks?
Sure. I think every island has their unique challenges and as well as unique opportunities. The Big Island of Hawaii, for example, is probably one of the most renewable rich islands in the state, and probably one of the more renewable rich locations in the country, if not the world. And that richness comes from having a variety of renewable resources. And so I think the Big Island has the advantage of having those options there before them. But it's also a big island. So a lot of these resources are located in different parts of the island. And to harness that energy cost effectively and take it to customers located quite a bit away is an example of some of the challenges. Same thing on Maui, where I was born and raised, very renewable rich, smaller customer base. I think smaller islands in general have an opportunity to progress faster and more rapidly. But at the same time, a lot of the engineering challenges are actually a little bit harder for some of the smaller islands. And I really applaud the folks at KIUC and out in the Kauai for making great strides in what they're doing. On Oahu, I think some of the challenges that we face is the challenge of size, right? Over 70% of the state's use of electricity is here on the island of Oahu. And so to make progress in the amount of renewable energy that we use, every percent here on Oahu is 5 times the amount of what is required to get the same percentage of an increase on one of our neighbor islands, and about 10 times more than what's needed on Kauai.
So we're going to get to a number of the sort of issues that are kind of spinning out of this, but I want to turn to you, Kylie, because Colton had touched on Hawaii Island and sort of what the layout is there and what some of the challenges may be. But another one of the challenges, and no doubt a lot of the legal arguments that have come up, have to do with, say, for example, Puna Geothermal Venture being there, the what's happening there, trying to do create renewable energy sources that create a lot of other conflicts and legal challenges. What's sort of your perspective as far as how this is playing out, whether it be on the Big Island or elsewhere throughout the state?
Sure, and thanks for having me on this show. I agree that we are on track so far on paper in terms of meeting our renewable portfolio standards and our interim goals for clean energy. But it's really important to remember that the last 10 years have been all about picking off the low-hanging fruit, like the easier to develop lands and the easier to develop rooftops. But the next 10 years are going to be critical to averting our climate crisis, and that means we need to move forward with a community-based approach. So we need to build our energy grid from the ground up with community support, both large-scale and small-scale rooftop projects.
You raised the issue of climate change and how it plays into all of this. I mean, that's definitely raises a lot of issues in some of the projects that are being looked at right now, whether you're talking about the Kapolei battery project and what's happening with that coal facility being closed. I know these are all issues, by the way, that I'm sure a lot of you or all of you could comment on. So even if I don't, call your name, feel free to raise your hand or say, hey, I want to comment on this. But I wanted to follow up with you on that as far as the climate challenge issues, Kylie, and what else you're seeing as really coming to the forefront that you see is going to continue to be an issue as we move forward in these renewable energy goals.
Sure. Retiring fossil fuel plants is a major challenge that we need to take really seriously and make sure that these fossil fuel plants retire on time. So we've seen in the news recently the AES coal plant, it's required by law to retire by the end of 2022. And because of delays in utility scale solar projects coming online, we're expecting shortfalls in energy for the fall of 22 and the fall of 23. Now, even though that sounds like kind of scary, we've also, the upside of that is that we've been able to, thanks to the PUC, look at other types of resources that are distributed throughout the grid in smaller scale. So the PUC recently created a program to provide emergency power to the grid using rooftop solar and home batteries. So the idea is that these solar PV panels will charge up batteries during the day and then commit to dispatching energy to the grid during the evening peak demand period. So this is a really great test case to see the power of customer side energy resources to fill needs that were traditionally provided by big power plants.
Maybe I can fill in some more, or you have a follow-up question?
James.
Yeah, as Kylie said, so there's a law where the largest power plant on this island, coal plant, is scheduled to retire next year. A law passed last year that basically requires that. The commission's not allowed to approve any renewal of that contract. There's been several years in the making of making sure we have enough new renewable projects online to replace that plant. We've been working closely with Hawaiian Electric, 2 rounds of utility scale procurement. And as Kylie said, we've also been looking at this as a whole portfolio project. So not just the large scale solar projects. We're looking at other types of customer resources and hopefully soon more community-based projects. As Kylie said, we have encountered a number of delays with the larger projects we were counting on, and we've had to bring kind of all projects to bear, all types of resources, and get everyone's attention to make sure that we can hold to the timelines we have for these projects, because it's a firm timeline to take the project off, the coal plant offline, and we need all the new resources to continue to come on to replace it. So we're looking at, so it's been a challenge. There's no question about it. The commission, I mean, Colton and I can talk, we've had our difficulties in dealing with the delays. The good news is when we look at the number of new projects coming online, we're gonna have the ability to retire additional fossil fuel plants after that. So some of the oldest oil fire generation as well after that. And we'll be looking at how we can apply this on Maui and the Big Island as well afterwards.
Laura, can I
Go ahead, Colton.
add to that? Thanks. So I want to make really clear that for everyone here, the lights here in Oahu, they're going to stay on. Kari made reference to what I think she said, shortfalls of energy. I think what Kari's referring to, that in our calculations of how much reserve generation we'll have, we are going to have slightly less reserve generation in the fall of 2022 and potentially in the second half of 2023. But that's having less reserves than what we have without AES. It doesn't mean that the lights are going on. We've been working on this for years, and we're going to have, over 300 megawatts of generation available to us to use beyond what we use here on Hawaii during our peak times in that fall. So I just want to make sure that for all of us, we have that comfort, that we do have plans in place. As Jay mentioned, we're pulling on many resources. There's not just the big resources, not the existing resources, but a lot of these new storage resources, the smaller solar and storage resources that Kari mentioned as well. They're all contributing to help us get through this period with reliable power.
Now, I want to dig into that just a little bit more because of what's kind of been back and forth publicly a little bit, and in some of the recent news articles about this. And there's been, some discussion on whether or not some of the incentives or the structure of how this transition would happen might be a little bit too rigid for HECO, or I know there were some issues with that and some concerns. So maybe could you explain to people a little bit more as to what you see as particularly challenging with the way this is being rolled out, and what you still have some issues with that you want to make sure people understand why it's an issue for HECO?
Yeah, thanks. I really wouldn't characterize any of what I'm going to say as being an issue per se. Really, I think what Jade mentioned is the fact that we're all coming together to work on this together, find solutions, working together, and not just with the PUC and other parties, but even the governor has set up a task force as well to find ways to bring projects back on schedule, address many permitting issues that may potentially be holding up some of these projects to get them back on track. So I think, if anything, I want to make sure that when we all have this discussion and work together towards ensuring that we make this transition in a reliable way, that we're communicating what we're doing and what this means, very clearly. I think part of our challenges has been that when we talk about periods in which we will have less reserves than what we have, say, in another period of time, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be short of power.
Now, I want to certainly get to our other guests, but I do want to follow up on just one little bit more point related to this, because there was reported just this week that AES Hawaii has submitted a request to convert its coal-burning electric plant into one that burns wood pellets instead, even though aside from that, it's expected to close September of next year. Where does that stand right now? If that has been submitted as a request, and that's now another potential direction that this will go. And then I want Kylie to jump in a little bit after this too, because no doubt all of you have been keeping tabs on it. But yeah. What's the situation there? If it looks like that door might be opened again in another way.
Yeah. So, Jay, go ahead.
Can I start? Well, okay. I think some of this started back in March, and the actually started before that as we first learned of the delays to renewable projects. But back in March, the commission put a call out basically to all stakeholders we we're very concerned about the potential for shortfalls with the delays in projects. Commission asked stakeholders to bring all ideas to us. We've received a large number of ideas, including what Kylie talked about, is how we can pair batteries with existing customer rooftop systems. And over the months as a result of this, one of the recent proposals, what AES put forward last week, and what they propose is to convert that coal plant to run on biomass, apparently pellets that would be imported from the mainland. They asked our commission to give some sort of indication within 30 days whether there was interest in that. We had a stakeholder discussion that we hosted online, status conference, where we asked directly to Colton's boss whether this was necessary. The cost of that proposal is significant, and I think one of the other concerns is that, as we understand it, there's a 4-month period where the coal plant would continue to run as is. And there's probably some legal questions about it. And so Colton's boss says that it's not, according to their analysis so far, that it's not necessary for reliability purposes. And when we look at the analysis with the whole range of projects and programs that we brought together, it looks to be that way so far. So I don't think this is a proposal that people are supportive of at the moment, based on what we've seen so far of the progress to projects.
Colton?
Let Colton and Kylie weigh in further.
Sure, I'll be brief. I think Jay said much of what I was planning to say. The only thing I'll add is that Jay mentioned pricing. We really don't have a proposal from AES, but in the letter that they submitted with some indicative pricing, when we look at those numbers and some of the assumptions that they have behind those numbers, it's going to be an expensive plant. So as proposed, number one, we don't need the capacity because we have many options before us, and we do plan to have sufficient reserves getting through this period. We think that the pricing is going to not be helpful to our customers in its current form in that letter. If AES wants to compete in a future procurement and compete with other renewable resources to us, we welcome that. But as is in the letter, we just don't see a compelling case to look at it further.
So Kylie, what stands out to you as you hear them discussing this?
Sure. So as far as biofuels go, they do emit a lot of greenhouse gases throughout their life cycle of producing the feedstock that goes into the power plants. So that's one environmental concern we have about biofuels. And then on top of that, upgrading the coal plant to run on biomass is going to cost a lot of money. And all of that money will eventually be paid by the ratepayer somehow. Once we have that asset converted to run on biofuels, it's going to be hard to turn that ship around. And so what we really want to focus on is other distributed energy resources like rooftop solar or even larger scale other types of renewable energy projects before we go down that path.
And David, I want to turn to you, and there have been a number of questions coming in directed to you in a positive way, saying, how were you able to create this structure there on Kauai, and how can it be sort of then transferred elsewhere within the state, whether it be on Oahu? But maybe when you're listening to sort of how some of these complex issues are rolling out on some of the other islands, what's sort of your perspective based on the structure that you've created there on Kauai and what's resulted because of that in the way that you've been able to move forward?
I think with our high penetration of renewables, particularly solar, we're ahead of the curve in terms of some of the technical challenges facing other islands, particularly Oahu. And I really believe it's an all of the above strategy. You have to pull in every available renewable resource that you can actually get done, sited, and online to hit our goals. It's particularly challenging on Oahu. And I hear talk about distributed solar as if it's the answer to solving Oahu's problems. And it's a part of the solution, absolutely, but it's not the solution. Everything's got to be done. Large scale projects have to be done, and pricing is a factor. And larger projects, particularly solar, about half the cost of rooftop solar. So all of it's got to be done. There's no real silver bullet answer, and they're all hard. None of the projects are easy. I don't really think there's been any low-hanging fruit in the state's conversion over to renewable energy. Every project has its challenges, and they seem to be getting more and more challenging the further along we go in our cycles. So Colton's got a challenge, Oahu's got a challenge to get there. We've got a challenge to keep progressing on Kauai, but I believe, all the stakeholders have to start pulling together. There's no perfect project. There's no perfect project with zero environmental factors. And we got to keep our eye on the bigger goal, which is getting off oil, helping ourselves in the fight against climate change. And everything's got to be evaluated and worked hard to push forward to meet the challenging goals in the state.
I just wanted to add on to what David was mentioning. So I do agree that KIUC's numbers, they look fantastic on paper as far as meeting our renewable energy targets. But it is important that that KIUC also adopts a community-centered approach to developing renewable energy projects. He mentioned a pump storage hydro project that's in the works for the west side of Kauai. This project is huge and it has great promise. It's going to be around for longer than most of our lifetimes, but there are real environmental and cultural concerns that the community has about the projects. So if that means taking a pause now so that the project can move faster later in order to consider all of those community concerns, then that's what KIUC should be doing. Then on the east side of Kauai, there are these old plantation era hydro systems that are diverting the sacred waters of Mount Waialeale. And it's important that as KIUC charges forward with a 21st century hydro project, that it considers retiring some of the older, more antiquated systems that the communities don't like.
Go ahead, David.
Environmental concerns are certainly important to us, and community-based, it's certainly important. We are actually owned, of course, by the community of Kauai, so it's hard to get any more community-focused than we are. And any project you do in this state has to go through robust environmental, cultural, archaeological considerations under the state law. It's a very robust process. It takes years to get through on some of the complex projects such as we're doing on the pump storage project. So I absolutely agree. It's essential. Projects have to be environmentally sound, but again, there's no perfect project, and you can't accomplish anything in the renewable world if you're looking to get 100%. Everybody agrees with it. Nobody has any concerns with the project. You've got to get good projects, weigh the pros and cons, weigh all the externalities, and keep your mind on the fact that there's bigger challenges out there in climate change, and we need to get off oil and keep the projects going forward that make good community sense.
Okay, so I need to get some of these viewer questions, and quite a few of them are maybe not surprising to all of you, having to do with sort of the wind farms in the Kahuku area and potential wind farms elsewhere. And, some of the questions have come in. Again, there have been a number here. One has to do with, this is from Melissa in Makaha, asking about some of the, where these sites are being located, if there are considerations, where these energy sites are being placed based on whether or not they're going to have an effect on Polynesian or Hawaiian communities, and if those inequities, possible inequities, are being addressed. But I also wanted to kind of tag in on another one from Loa, Ko'olauloa, talking about these being banned in other areas. There being increasing information, according to her, about some safety problems, and whether or not we should be reconsidering whether or not not only should they be there, but should we be adding more? So I don't know who wants to jump in first as to where your perspective stands now, with still a lot of community concern about them being there, and then the possible expansion of those types of renewable energy.
Go ahead, Colton.
Okay, I'll be brief, Kylie. So with the two questions that you got and shared with us, Laura, I think what I'd like to respond with is saying, at the end of the day, we're all in this together, right? We're trying to reduce our use of fossil fuels, increase our use of renewable energy, in part because we want to do our part to mitigate the effects of climate change. And that's something that affects the entire island, it affects the entire state, it really affects the entire world. At the same time, our efforts to do that will have specific impacts in specific communities. And therein lies the challenge, right? There's this worldwide mission and objective that will impact communities differently. And so, to sort of answer that question from a broader perspective first, I think the right way and a better way to really have siting of projects done is to have those early discussions with communities, right? And folks will use phrases like "go slow to go fast," or go slow to go fast. And I think there's a lot to be said for having good, complete, and comprehensive discussions with communities before a project is proposed. And for Hawaiian Electric, a lot of the complexity is the fact that we're not the ones ourselves that are doing these projects. It's like in KIUC, the projects are being developed by third parties. So we all need to work together in advance of those projects being permitted, going through their processes to first understand and have discussions with the communities of what the options are, what the trade-offs are, so that we can get input from those communities, again, before our project is built.
Go ahead, Kylie.
Sure. I was just going to plus one to what Colton said about how it's important to engage community early on and understand what the concerns are. And that goes back to my point about building the clean energy grid from the bottom up with broad-based community support. But then on the other side of that, there is a real opportunity to chip away at the big pie of our energy needs by maximizing customer side resources like rooftop solar, home batteries. And in this way, we can avoid the need for as much big projects as we otherwise might have needed. And also at the same time, lower customers' electricity bills and build an overall more resilient system.
If I look at a lot of the questions that are coming in, I think there's still, I'm sure some of you might be surprised by, a lot of concern and confusion and maybe mistrust as far as the process, for one, with how, the wind farms are being rolled out in Kahuku. This is Casey from Facebook asking about why the health and safety information on huge wind turbines in Kahuku are kept secret, and why we're not holding big wind energy companies accountable and liable to us as taxpayers. I mean, I don't know how much you can get into those details, but I think the question being is there maybe a need for more community outreach? Do we feel that that people understand enough about what's happening, or more trust building needs to happen? Considering that these questions are coming in, there's also a couple from Lonnie. Asking about, where are these components coming from? Is it coming from outside of the state? Is it really benefiting us in the way that we feel it's benefiting? A lot of different kind of questions coming at different angles, but I don't know who might want to kind of address sort of some of these kind of concerns overall as to the transparency of it and what's being shared with the public.
Maybe let me try and
James.
take a couple. And I'm going to be a little careful because we still have a court action pending and decision related to the Kahuku Wind project. But we've certainly heard the concerns. We've had protesters out in front of our office here and in our hearing room related to that project. I would say probably one of my low points in my time here is to have to wake up one morning and watch, armed convoys bringing, the components to the North Shore and people protesting. We're not going to be successful in what the state's trying to do if that would be the leading case of failure and to some degree. So we have to do better. And so I think as more concerns have come in, we had some of our staff go out with Hawaiian Electric staff to do voltage measurements in the Kahuku community. That was all taped, live broadcast. So I think we've tried to be responsive. And I think in the most recent rounds of renewable projects, if you actually look at the total numbers, so there's 20 projects total throughout the state proposed, and of these rounds, only 2 have been actively opposed, at least at this point before our commission. So I don't think the process is perfect yet, but I think there's been a number of different steps to improve on that. And next week, we're holding a stakeholder conference with community members on Molokai. We heard concerns about the proposals there. And so, we've been trying to actively work and receive that feedback and look at how we can improve that in the future. So I think, the reality of it's not clear that there's a path for further wind development in the near term, at least onshore most of these islands, until that, the broken trust is healed, and if that's possible. I don't think there's any to not see that. I think misses everything we've seen happen in the community there.
Quick question
And
from.
Laura,
Go ahead, Colton.
if I can just add to what Jay said. So we learned a lot of lessons with our earlier procurements. And one of the things that we did to improve our procurements of renewable projects is to establish some minimum requirements. In of it alone, it's not enough, but to set a minimum standard of the requirements of any developer that's going to enter into a contract with us, where we're going to purchase renewable energy from them, for those developers and their teams to go through a community engagement process as part of their projects early on, before things are built. And we do that to improve the process, not to say that that's all that needs to be done, but I think that's a good example of things that we've learned in talking to communities, talking to community leaders about what they feel is deficient with some of the earlier projects and the processes that they went through.
Okay, quick related question from Charles here. I don't know if any of you can answer this or not, but he's asking about the blades on the wind turbines. When are the blades? When are they replaced? Who's responsible for disposal, and what is the disposal process? Can any of you answer this question from Charles?
I think that's a question that's best directed to the actual wind farm developers and project owners. What I can say, Lara, to that question is that under our contracts with our independent power producers, is that they have the responsibility throughout the project to meet all legal and regulatory requirements, including safety requirements. And at the end of the project, they have certain responsibilities to remove their facilities and essentially kind of return that site back to some pre-project level. But the details of the question is really something that a project developer is going to need to answer.
So, David, I have to say you're getting a lot of props from folks just, looking at what you're doing and really seeing it as a shining light. David from Hawaii Island saying, why can't we have electric cooperatives on other islands like Kauai? So definitely a lot of recognition for the work that you're doing out there. But I wanted to kind of sort of build on that a little bit with some of the questions we're getting about electric vehicles and sort of where that plays into all of this. We got, Michael asking about, hey, renewables, 67% renewables on Kauai is great, but are we going to be able to stay ahead of our goals, say, with an auto fleet rapidly converting to electric vehicles by 2030? And, a couple others saying, hey, where are we with this? Larry asking about the conversion, how that's going to affect the amount of renewable energy available. And maybe I just want to start with you, David, because they're kind of using it as sort of an example. I don't know to what extent you can answer this, but I'm a little curious too if there's been any consideration as far as pilot projects on Kauai related to this, because you're in a smaller area.
Thank you for that question. EVs are one of the greatest challenges and the greatest opportunities for utilities throughout the industry right now. And we have, within our boardroom, we have discussions every meeting about what we should be doing on EVs, what we shouldn't be doing, where the industry is going. Right now on Kauai, we have, I think it's 420 registered electric vehicles. And the big question is, where are we going to be 2 years from now? Where are we going to be 10 years from now? what is the role of an electric cooperative? Should we be subsidizing more EV utilization because it can help increase sales, increase ideally using our renewables that we may not be able to use and have to curtail otherwise, or have to use more expensive solar to do so? And what do we need to do? Where's the industry going to be going? HECO spent a lot of effort on that, and on Maui, they're kind of ahead of the game in terms of infrastructure investments from a utility, and we're watching them very closely. As cooperative in particular, we don't want to invest our money in areas that we don't need to. One of the debates we have is a car purchase, as large as it is, something that an electric company has to incentivize and spend money to support the investment in, or will that happen organically? Do people buy a car because they like the car, or do they buy it because they want a little bit 1% off the car that the electric company then spreads throughout all their customers to support? So we're debating that almost on a weekly basis, and I think it's just there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of opportunity there.
How many charging stations are there on, whether it be on Kauai and also on Oahu? A lot of people wanting to know if there are going to be more charging stations.
Can I weigh in here,
Yeah,
Larry? The good news today, I was fortunate to attend a bill signing. I think it was 4 bills total, 3 related to this topic. The legislature and the governor have supported an additional program that the commission helps implement through the Hawaii Energy customer program, where we are funding electric vehicle, the charging infrastructure. The State Department of Transportation has taken a strong leadership role in electrifying the fleet for the state vehicles, and there's some more legislation related to that. The state's goals are to significantly clean the transportation sector too. And so the way I've viewed this is, from just the electric demand side, we need to be shooting over 100% in the traditional sense, because we're going to convert any significant amount of the transportation sector with clean electricity. It's going to be a lot more than our demand today. So that's that it will be a significant challenge. But to do that, and when David talks about getting off oil, and that's getting off all of our use, as much of the use of oil as possible, both for the fuel that we use in power plants, but in cars and trucks. That's one of our most significant sources of dependence today in the islands. But we've had some significant setbacks in the past year with our refinery here, asking us to increase what they're charging us to buy the oil from them.
Okay, so I said I wasn't going to ask you a real question, but I lied. Here's a real question. This is Paka.
I said I would defer to Colton.
There you go. This is Paka Lania from Instagram. She sent in asking, how does the rail running on electricity fit into this?
Yeah, so it's actually a great question, all kidding aside about rail being a taboo topic for tonight. The light rail system on Oahu is a really good example of a zero, low carbon source of transportation that is also highly efficient. So electric vehicles are great. I own one. I think Jay, you own one. They're wonderful. Kylie, you too as well.
Lease one.
They're efficient. They're quiet, they're economical. But the one thing that's even more economic than a Nissan Leaf is all of us getting on the same rail to get from one place to another, right? Not only is it lower carbon, but it's also lower in cost. So I think rail and mass transit using a zero carbon source is an important part of our solution. Putting aside all of the controversy around the rail project, zero carbon mass transit is a wonderful piece to get us to our decarbonization goals.
Okay, so I might take a couple of... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I
Kylie,
just wanted
okay.
to add in on the transportation portion of the discussion, which is that electrification of transportation is key to solving our climate puzzle. And the idea is that we push all of the traditionally gas emissions over to the electric side and then electrify the grid. But the most important thing we need to do as we do that is plan for the demand from electric vehicles. And secondly, make sure that charging of EVs occurs at the most optimal times of day. Right now, our peak demand on all islands is basically the time that energy is used the most is in the evening period. So we really don't want everyone running home with their EVs and plugging them in all at the same time. So we're also working on programs to make sure that EV charging is managed so that it doesn't exacerbate and create the need for even more electric generation.
Okay, so we got a little less than 10 minutes left, and there's a lot of kind of questions floating out there still that I want to try and get to. And one of them is of course, the bottom line, which Bob from Kaneohe is asking about. With all investments in renewable resources, when will we see reductions in our electric bills? Colton, you
Sure.
hesitated.
I'm from Kaneohe too, so maybe that's my neighbor that asked the question. It's a tough one to answer, right? But what I can say is that the renewable energy resources that we are working on today, the ones that we recently contracted, or some of them are in the process of being built today, are being contracted at prices less than what we would be paying if we were to just remain on oil, right? We're reducing the cost of generation versus what we would have been otherwise. Now, that's not the same thing as a reduction in your bill, but we're significantly reducing the cost of generation on our system. And the way we're regulating our cost of generation, any reductions in savings from those purchases are passed on to our customers. So for all of the customers that we serve here in Oahu and Maui County and Hawaii Island, all of these projects that we're adding over the next several years are some of the lowest cost renewable, actually some of the lowest cost resources, period, that we've been able to contract for, and they're renewable and they're coupled with storage. And so they'll really help to mitigate the cost of generation on our grids.
So I know it's tough on these to do short answers, but if we're getting a little tight on time, but I want to get to some really important issues. One in particular about what are the difficulties between having these lands for these renewable energy projects and having these lands for agricultural purposes. I know there's definitely a lot of complications there because there's competing entities who want this land, whether it be for the renewable or whether it be for the agriculture. Who wants to dive into this as far as what you're looking at to try and figure out how to be able to reach these competing, in some ways, competing goals?
I know I spoke a lot, but can I do a short answer on
Please
this
do, go ahead.
Yeah, so, I think what it comes down to, Laura, is that there are policies in place in the state today that aren't perfectly aligned. We have these great important goals and objectives, but the policies to carry them out, I think, don't fully capture and appreciate and consider this very point. What's the highest and best use of land given our policies and objectives so that we can make more informed decisions, right? Not just through an individual debate for one project, but more comprehensively through land use policies and regulations to say, hey, these kinds of lands are best used for this purpose. These kinds of lands are best used for another purpose. It doesn't result in the best solution for either one, but together it's the best solution for our state. And I think that's the way we got to look at it.
David, Oh, go ahead, Kylie. And then David, I want you to jump in too, because I would imagine this is something that's being discussed on Kauai as well.
Sure. I just wanted to add that there is an opportunity to maximize sloped ag lands, which could be used to develop solar projects and are less ideal for farming. So we can continue to look and maximize the space we have available.
And on Kauai, it's been a lot easier because there's thousands of acres of agricultural land not in any productive use right now. The bigger challenge here is finding productive uses for the agricultural land and ideally growing things that can help feed our population. But we can have a whole session on that for probably a couple hours about what can be done to help bring more agriculture to our island. But our PV is just a small fraction, and it's important, but it's not taking away any agriculture.
James, is there any other specifics you can add as far as like what people need to be including in this discussion to try to find a balance or a way forward in this? As far as, we've got limited land here. It's going to be a challenge.
Well, and to your point, I think it's the most where we're seeing this pop up is on this island, where a lot of the solar projects are being proposed in central Oahu, Kunia area. And look, I think it's an area where there's got to be more innovation, more discussion with the folks involved. We're seeing some of it, how some of the newer developers are looking to have other types of agricultural uses coexisting with the solar projects. So it's going to take discussion like that as well. But I think, we're trying to race to a goal here. So I know in our shoes, we're being pressed to go do things faster and quicker. And so I think we've been trying to help that discussion along, but most of the decision making takes place outside of the PUC.
No.
So I've been working with our energy office as well to have some of those discussions with the other agencies.
We've only got a few minutes left, but this is a technical question that I think is important to ask. This is from Mike in New Valley, and this is for HECO. It says, as 2045 approaches, does HECO plan to keep the secondary grid network that supplies most of the current electricity to the downtown area? He goes on to say the power requirements can be very large for grid networks, and as HECO transitions to renewable resources, are grid networks still viable, or will HECO change to a non-grid network? Go ahead, Colton.
Wow, that's a very specific question.
It is a important one.
Yeah, so in downtown Honolulu, we have a very unique distribution system that's networked. I think that's what the question's about. And yeah, we still see it having a future. We think it's compatible with our grid today. We think it's going to be compatible with our grid in 2045. The need to provide redundant, reliable distribution power to our downtown area and the businesses that are there is something that we've had going all the way back to the 50s. And that additional reliability that we get from that network system, I think is going to be as valuable or perhaps even more valuable in the future. As Kylie talks about, more things are going to be electrified. So the more we rely on electricity to power our lives, guess what? We all are going to raise our expectations on that power being there when we want it to be there.
All right, so we only got a couple minutes left, and I want to give the rest of you about 30 seconds each or so to anything else as far as what you want people that you think is most important for people to focus on right now. And I know there are a lot of different areas to go here, but maybe we'll turn to you first, Kylie. One thing we didn't get to was about when it comes to climate change, about these rising temperatures and what kind of strain that might put on the efforts. But your thoughts, what do you think is most important for people to keep in mind moving forward?
I think the key takeaway is that rooftop solar and home batteries can contribute so much to the grid in so many ways, and we really need to set policies that promote those resources. Right now, there's more megawatts of rooftop solar on the grid than any other clean energy resource. So we really need to come up with ways to continue to moving down that path.
And David, as you think about where Kauai is going now, and also how those models are being looked at, not only here within the state, but internationally in a lot of ways, some of the projects that you're working on. What can you share with folks as far as what the next steps are and what the most important things are that you want them to be able to stay connected to and understand?
A lot of technical challenges as we get closer and closer to 100% renewable. The grids are very complex, and we've got very good engineers at our company, and we work with some of the leading providers in the industry, but we have to pull together on a technical side, we have to pull together on a project siting side, and work hard to make good projects happen, and bring as many people into the discussion, but make good decisions and make them quick to help us achieve our goals as a state and ultimately as a globe.
James, any final thoughts? About 20 seconds.
Okay, I think this is exciting opportunity for the state of Hawaii to lead the world. We're seeing that happen at the moment, and in the next 5 years, we're going to see more progress than we'd ever expected 5-10 years ago, and next generation is going to benefit from it.
And very briefly, Colton, final thoughts?
Sure. I think the key message I'll leave behind is that we can't leave anyone behind. We have to bring all of us in Hawaii towards this clean energy future.
All right, thank you, all of you, and mahalo to all of you for joining us tonight. We thank our guest, James Griffin from the State of Hawaii Public Utilities Commission, Colton Ching, Senior Vice President at Hawaiian Electric, David Bissell, President and CEO of the Kauai Island Utility Cooperative, and Senior Attorney at Earth Justice, Kylie Ueja-Cruz. All right, next week on Insights, it's already been announced that all public schools will reopen in the fall with students reporting to class. We're going to hear from educators on what that's going to look like and what safety measures will be in place. Please join us then. I'm Laurie Mata for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Oahu.